They say pride's a sin, but it's the last thing I had to give, and I gave it in the town square of Bitter Hollow, under the cracked sky and the cold stares of people who knew my name once, back before the mountain took my husband. My daughter, Lahi, was barefoot and quiet beside me. Her hands were red from the cold, and I swear her bones made more noise than her voice did. We hadn't eaten in 2 days. The wind was crueler than usual, pushing our skin back from our bones, daring us to cry. I didn't. I couldn't. Not in front of her. The general store had bread. I could smell it from the stoop. Fresh, warm, wrapped in burlap. I didn't plan to steal it. I just asked for a slice. Just one. For her. Mr. Clayton, the owner, looked down at me like I'd spit on his porch. "We don't trade pity here," he said, loud enough for the gawkers to hear. Then came the sheriff, Buckland. Tall, thick in the chest, wore a black hat like it made him something important. "Beggin's illegal," he said, almost bored, "and illegal needs keachin'." They dragged me to the square, tied my hands to the post with rusted chain. I didn't fight. I didn't cry. I just looked at Lahi and told her to stay where she could see me. The first lash came fast. It sounded like a split tree. The leather tore through the back of my blouse and into my skin like it had something personal to prove. I gasped, I won't lie, but I didn't scream. The second and third came slower. Buckland wanted me to dance, to wail, to beg, but I had nothing left to give him, not after burying my husband in a mountain grave carved from ice, not after carrying our girl down that ridge through 2 snowstorms and a fever so bad I forgot my own name for a while. The townsfolk watched. I saw the whites of their eyes, how they blinked slow like this was a sermon and I was the lesson. Nobody moved. Nobody stepped in. Lahi never looked away. That's what haunts me most. Her tiny face set like stone, her jaw clenched in a way no child's ever should be. She watched her mama get whipped like a thief for asking for bread. After the 5th lash, I fell. My knees buckled and the world tilted. Blood hit the dirt. Buckland leaned down, his voice sour with chew. "Next time, starve quietly." They cut the chains. I crawled, not walked, to the edge of town. Lahi helped me, her hand on my shoulder, her piney voice whispering, "Keep going, Mama." She was the one who gave me strength, not God. God was nowhere near Bitter Hollow that day. We made it past the last homestead before I collapsed under an old pine. My back screamed, my pride gone. I should have died there, but I didn't. I chose to live, not just breathe, but survive. Not for me, for her. Something in me shifted that night under the tree. Something quiet but sharp. I didn't know it yet, but we weren't alone in those mountains. And someone had been listening.
I don't take kindly to ghosts, but I hear 'em just the same. Some in my sleep, others in the wind. But that night, the cry I heard wasn't a ghost. It was a child. High, thin, carried over the pines like smoke. I sat both upright in my cot. My cabin's a ways up, North Ridge near Old Devil's Gulch. Nothing lives up here long but elk and regrets. So when I heard that sound, I knew 2 things. 1, someone was lost. 2, the mountain don't forgive mistakes. I pulled on my boots and grabbed my Spencer rifle, heart pounding like war drums again. Thought I'd left that rhythm in Virginia with the corpses. Turns out, it never really leaves you. I tracked the sound, slow and steady. The moon lit just enough to see broken branches, scattered blood drops, a child's footprint in the crusted snow. Then I saw them, curled at the base of a pine, the woman nearly unconscious, the girl wrapped around her like bark on a tree. She was muttering, delirious, blood soaked through her shirt, turning the snow beneath her a dark red. The little one, Leahy, had her arms locked around her mama's waist, her face calm but hollowed out like she'd already made peace with death. I didn't ask who they were, didn't need to. I could read the whole damn story in one glance. They were running from something worse than wolves, and I've seen enough of the world to know what men are capable of when they think no one's watching. "Hey there," I said gently. "You ain't dead yet." The girl looked up first, not scared, just tired, like she'd already lived too many years in too small a body. "She needs help," she said. I carried the woman, Sarah I'd find out later, back to my cabin, laid her on the cot, made a fire, boiled water, and stitched what I could. She never woke, but she breathed. That was enough. Leahy didn't say much, just stared into the flames like they were telling her secrets. She sat beside her mama all night, not blinking. I made her stew from what I had, mostly root, some rabbit. She ate slow, polite, like eating was something sacred. Next morning, Sarah woke coughing and confused. When she saw me, she tried to rise, her eyes wild with fear. "Easy," I said. "You're safe now." She didn't believe me, not at first. Can't blame her. I looked like a bear in a coat and smelled like pine sweat. But after a while, her breathing settled. She asked my name. "Abraham Coyle, ex-captain, Union Army. Now, just a man who listens to the woods." She said her name was Sarah Penrose. Told me what happened in Bitter Hollow, how they beat her for asking for bread, how the sheriff stood proud while it happened, how no one stopped it. Something broke loose in me when she said it. That same rage I thought I'd buried with the dead back east, it clawed up my throat like a fire I'd swallowed years ago. And this time, it had a face. Sheriff Buckland. I let them rest 2 days, let her body catch up to her spirit, but I already knew what I had to do. "You gonna run again?" I asked her on the third morning. She looked up. "I don't know how much running we got left." "Then maybe it's time someone else did the running." I strapped on my boots, took my rifle, and told them I was going down to Bitter Hollow. Not for food, not for justice, but for a warning.
We didn't sleep much after that. Every sound in the forest felt like boots or hooves. Every flicker of shadow outside the stone walls felt like eyes watching us. But we stayed busy. Fear don't do well when your hands are moving. Sarah boiled pine sap to seal cracks in the old shutter boards. I scavenged a collapsed cabin half a mile down the slope and dragged back an iron stove door we could mount on the fort gate. Leahy kept watch with the spyglass I'd had since the war. Too big for her face, but she didn't miss a thing. She was only 8, but there was something ancient in her now. Trauma ages a soul faster than time. By the 5th day, the traps were set and the fort as ready as it ever be. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for and dreading. Distant hoofbeats. I took position in the north tower, just a stacked pile of stone, really, with my rifle trained on the switchback trail. Sarah and Leahy crouched in the old mess hall below, behind the stove and a few rows of overturned crates. Through the glass, I saw them. A dozen riders, maybe more. Sheriff Buckland out front, black hat tipped low, eyes like a buzzard who smells blood. Behind him were 4 bounty hunters I didn't recognize, and 3 townsmen who should have known better. They came slow, confident, the kind of swagger men wear when they think they're the only wolves around. Buckland raised a hand and called out, "Coyle, I ain't here to negotiate." "Good. I don't speak coward anyway." That earned a murmur from his men. Buckland's smile cracked. "You got one chance. Turn over the girl. The mother can go west and rot for all I care, but the child comes with us, or we burn that fort to the ground with you in it." I didn't answer. I let the silence speak. Then one of the bounty hunters dismounted and crept up the east side, thinking he was slick. That's when one of the tripwires snapped and the forest answered. Snap, whistle, crack. He screamed as the spiked log trap swung down and crushed his leg, pinning him to the frozen earth. The horses panicked, rearing. Buckland barked orders. I fired one shot, just one. Took off the hat of the man nearest the gate. The bullet nicked his scalp and sent him scrambling. "We ain't alone. This fort's rigged. You keep pushing and you'll be counting bodies, not threats." Buckland hesitated. He didn't like odds that bit back. "Fall back," he barked. "We regroup at sundown." They retreated, dragging the injured man behind them, leaving nothing but churned up dirt and the smell of fear. Inside the fort, Sarah collapsed against the wall, shaken, not from weakness, but from the adrenaline that comes when you realize you're still alive. Lahi didn't move. She just stared out the window, jaw tight. "They'll come again," Sarah said. "Yes," I replied, "but next time they'll be scared." That night we reinforced the walls again. Sarah helped melt lead to pour into small molds I carved from pine. Crude bullets, birdie weapons, but they'd do. We ate quietly. Stew again. Nobody complained. Before bed, I caught Sarah looking at me different. Not soft, but not so guarded either. "You didn't have to help us," she said. "You could have turned your back and left us to die." "I could have," I replied, "but the war taught me one thing. When you see evil, you either stop it or you become part of it." We both stared into the fire a while after that. Outside, the night creaked with the weight of coming violence, but inside, the 3 of us sat together, not victims, not runaways, defenders. And we were ready.
The road back to Bitter Hollow felt shorter than I remembered. That's the thing about anger. It shrinks the world down to the size of a bullet. I didn't ride in quiet either. I made sure they heard me coming. My horse clapped loud across the plank bridge, coat steaming from the climb. I wanted eyes on me. I wanted them to remember the name Abraham Coyle before I gave them reason to. Sheriff Buckland was on the porch of the jailhouse, boots kicked up like a man who'd never had a real worry in his life. When he saw me, he grinned like we were old poker friends. "Well, I'll be. Look who the mountain dragged down." I didn't speak, just tossed a small, blood-stained scrap of fabric onto the porch. It was torn from Sarah's blouse, the lash marks still visible. His smile faltered. "You threatening me, Coyle?" "No," I said, loud enough for the folks across the street to hear. "I'm telling you, next time you raise a whip to a woman, you best pray I'm not within earshot." He stood. "That's a bold warning for a man with no badge." "I got something better. A conscience." We stared each other down. He didn't move, but I saw the twitch in his jaw. I turned and rode out, not waiting for whatever half-baked speech he had ready. Back at the cabin, Sarah was packing what little we had into an old wool sack. She didn't ask what I did. She just said, "We can't stay." She was right. I knew Buckland, knew his kind. Men like him don't let pride wounds heal, they fester. And when they come back, they bring hounds. There was only one place I knew might keep us alive: Fort Banner. It was built decades ago, abandoned when the army pulled out. Stone walls, iron gate, hidden trail. I'd passed it once during a winter hunt. Nobody went there. Too far, too cold, too forgotten. Perfect. We left that night. The wind cut hard across the ridge, but Sarah held Lahi close and followed every step I took like she was born for this. The girl didn't complain once, just held her mama's hand like it was a lifeline. Took us 2 days to reach the fort, and when we did, I knew we'd made the right call. Thick stone walls still stood tall, roof gone on one side, but the foundation held. We got a fire going, patched what we could, and I set to work on the defenses. Pit traps near the trail, reinforced the front gate, hid rifles at every corner I could. Sarah helped where she could, limping from her healing wounds, but never stopping. There was steel in her, same as in the mountains. On the 3rd day, a hawk cried overhead. I took it as a sign, and I was right. That evening, a rider came, one of Buckland's men, young, cocky, with a note in his hand and a gun at his hip. He didn't get off the horse. "Sheriff says you got 2 days to return the child. Says she's a ward of the town now. Mother's deemed unfit." Sarah's face went white. I stepped forward. "You tell Buckland if he wants the girl, he better bring an army and a shovel for every man he sends." The deputy's grin faded. He turned and rode fast. Sarah sat down hard on a rock, clutching Lahi to her chest. "They'll come," she whispered. "They'll come and kill us." "No," I said, squatting beside her. "They'll try, but they'll find something they didn't expect." "What's that?" "People worth dying for, and people worth killing for."
The fog rolled in just before dawn, thick as cream, low to the ground, swallowing trees and stones like the mountain had decided to erase itself. It was the kind of fog soldiers used before ambushes, the kind that plays tricks on your ears and makes you taste metal in your throat. I didn't like it, but it favored the quiet ones, and we were outnumbered. Sarah stood at the narrow slit in the stone wall, her face pale but calm. She held the Henry repeater I'd cleaned the night before, her finger hovering just beside the trigger. Leahy sat nearby, wrapping old cloth around spent shell casings, turning them into crude alarms. She didn't ask questions. She just did the work. At mid-morning we heard them. Hooves again, but slower now, hesitant. Buckland was coming back, but this time he'd brought the town. Not all of it, but enough. Farmers with pitchforks, shopkeepers holding pistols they didn't know how to use, the blacksmith with his apron still on. A dozen or more. Some looked ashamed. Most looked confused. All of them looked scared. And there at the front was Buckland, riding tall like a general. He stopped just out of rifle range, then raised a hand. "We don't want blood," he shouted. "This ain't about vengeance. It's about order." I looked at Sarah. She shook her head. "I need to speak," she whispered. I didn't argue. She stood atop the stone wall, wrapped in a heavy wool cloak, her voice soft but sharp as a blade. I came to your town with a starving child and nothing else. I begged for bread, not favors, and you answered with whips. You all stood there. You all watched." Murmurs in the crowd. Eyes dropped. Buckland shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. "I was punished like an animal. My daughter watched it happen, and you," she pointed straight at Buckland, "you called it justice." Silence. "You want order? Then start by looking at yourselves. You let this man turn cruelty into law, and now you ask us to hand over a child so he can feel powerful again." The crowd stirred. A man I recognized from the general store, Clayton, stepped forward. "That true, Buckland? She really just asked for bread?" "She was loitering, disturbing the peace," Buckland snapped. "I followed the law." "What law?" someone else muttered. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, but it carried. "My husband died up in the mountain. Fever took him. I came down because I had nowhere else to go. You could have saved us. Instead, you made my little girl watch her mother bleed in the dirt." Buckland's horse snorted and shifted. He knew the tide was turning. He pulled his revolver. "You've made your speech, woman. Now stand down before someone gets hurt." That's when I stood. "You pull that trigger, and I swear to God you'll be eating with your left hand for the rest of your life." He aimed. I didn't give him the chance. One clean shot, left shoulder. He screamed and dropped his gun, sliding sideways off his horse. The crowd gasped. 2 of the townsmen ran to him. He was alive, but he wouldn't be lifting anything heavier than shame for a long time. And with him down, the crowd broke. Not into violence, but into confusion, questions, doubts. That's all it takes sometimes. One crack in the dam. Sarah came down from the wall and sat beside me. Her hands were shaking. I asked her if she was all right. She said no, but I think I finally believe we can be. Leahy stood behind her mother, silent, holding her hand. The fog didn't clear, but the silence that followed was the first peace we'd felt in weeks.
Marshal Anders wasn't a man you summoned lightly. You earned his attention through blood or letters soaked in it. I sent him both. He came 6 days after the standoff, just as our food ran low and Sarah's shoulder began to stiffen from an old infection reawakening. I'd known Anders during the war, fought beside him at Spotsylvania. He was the kind of man who read slow, talked slow, and shot fast. Trusted him more than I trusted any preacher. He arrived on a black gelding, flanked by 2 deputies in federal coats. The moment Sarah saw that silver badge, she buckled at the knees and wept. Not out of fear, relief. We told him everything. Sat on crates in the old mess hall while Leahy watched from the rafters above, quiet as snowfall. Sarah showed him the scars on her back. I handed over Buckland's threat, still stained from the trail. Anders listened, didn't interrupt once. When it was done, he said 5 words I hadn't expected to hear. "Let's bring him to trial." Sarah blinked. "You mean real trial, not a noose in the dark?" Anders nodded. "Every snake deserves sunlight. Let the whole town see what he's done." It was risky, but it was right. We'd stayed in the dark long enough. We packed light, rode hard. Sarah and Leahy shared my horse. Anders led the way. We took a side trail I'd used once during winter hunting, narrow, steep, and easy to miss if you weren't born to the ridge. We reached Bitter Hollow by dusk. Town was quiet, but too quiet, the kind that feels staged. And sure enough, the moment we passed the old sawmill, I spotted 3 riders ahead, faces wrapped in kerchiefs, rifles slung low. Ambush. I kicked my horse hard and threw Sarah and Leahy behind a water trough. Anders dismounted in one smooth motion and barked, "Drop the rifles." They didn't, so he fired. 2 shots, one knee and one shoulder. The third man bolted. I chased him down by foot, tackled him near the blacksmith's barn, yanked his mask off. Wasn't a stranger. It was Horace Dunn, the mayor's nephew, and a coward. "You working for Buckland?" I growled, lip bleeding. "He told us you were coming, said if we stopped you, he'd call it even." I dragged him by the collar back to the street. Anders spat. "This your town now? Bounty hugs and ambushes?" People started peeking out of their windows. I could feel 'em watching. Shame spreads faster than fire. We marched straight to the jailhouse. Buckland was inside, left arm in a sling, sipping coffee like he still had the world in his pocket. Anders didn't say a word, just tossed the warrant on his desk. "You're under arrest, Sheriff, by federal order." Buckland laughed. "I run this town. You and your paperwork can get—" Anders backhanded him so hard the tin cup flew across the room. He cuffed him with iron shackles, tight enough to draw blood. Buckland spat. "You'll regret this, Coyle. You and that whore and her bastard." I hit him. Just once, but I made it count. "You already regret it," I said. Sarah stood outside the jailhouse, holding Leahy tight as Anders led Buckland out. The townsfolk gathered. No one cheered, but no one stopped us either. Sometimes silence is the loudest kind of justice. That night we stayed in the town inn. Sarah cried for the first time without shame. Leahy finally slept a full night, her small hand curled around a carved pine horse I'd given her weeks ago. Tomorrow we'd ride again, this time not to run, but to return, to reclaim what they'd tried to take.
We returned to the ridge 2 days later, this time not as fugitives, but as something closer to free. Marshal Anders stayed behind to oversee Buckland's transfer and keep the town from sliding back into its old rot. Before we left, he handed me a paper with the marshal's seal and one simple line stamped in red, "Clear to settle." The road back up to Fort Banner was hard on the horse, but easy on the spirit. There was no fog this time, no blood in the snow, no gunmen hiding in the trees. Just the sound of wind and hooves and a low murmur of a family who'd walked through fire and come out the other side. Sarah sat straighter in the saddle now. Her wounds were healing, the bruises were fading, but something deeper had changed too. She didn't flinch at shadows anymore. And when Leahy asked questions about lawmen, about trials, about why no one had helped before, Sarah answered without shame. "They were scared," she said softly. "Scared of what doing right might cost them. But that fear doesn't belong to us anymore." When we crested the final ridge and the old fort came into view, Sarah gasped. Someone had been there. The brush was cleared, the firewood stacked high, and in front of the gate, nailed into a post, was a folded letter. She opened it with shaking hands. It was from Clara, the midwife who'd stitched Sarah up once before Buckland made her choose silence over kindness. Clara wrote that word had spread, that folks had started talking, really talking. She'd gathered women from the church. Old Mr. Clayton had stepped down from the store. The council was calling for a new sheriff. At the bottom were 2 lines Sarah read out loud. "You weren't the problem. You were the mirror, and we couldn't bear what we saw." She didn't cry first. She just stared at the mountains. Then, like a dam finally giving way, the tears came. I held her while she wept. Not out of grief, but release. Inside the fort, we found a small parcel on the table. Flour, dried apples, a tin of peppermint drops, a gift, a peace offering. We unpacked our things in silence. It felt strange being still. No gunshots, no deadlines,
Just the creak of old timber and the sound of Leahy humming softly to herself. That night, I took them both up to the ridge, where you can see the whole valley spread out like a painting. Stars thick as salt, sky wide enough to hold every mistake you ever made. I handed Sarah an envelope. She looked at it, confused. "It's the deed to the land. My name's on it, but I'm changing that." She stared at me, mouth slightly open. "This place, Fort Banner, this ridge, it belongs to you now. You and Leahy." Abraham, I can't." "You already have. You just needed someone to remind you it was yours." She didn't speak for a long time, just leaned her head on my shoulder and closed her eyes. "I don't know what this is between us, but it feels like something that could last." I nodded. "It already has." Leahy ran ahead of us down the trail, her laughter echoing through the trees. I hadn't heard that sound in so long, it almost broke me. We didn't talk about the past after that. Not that night, not for a while. Some things you bury not to forget, but to make room for what's next. And for the first time since I came to this mountain, I started thinking about next.
Spring came late that year, crawling up the ridges like a cautious visitor. The air smelled of thawing pine and wet stone, a sharp sweetness that made the past feel distant, almost unreal. We rebuilt the fort together, each stone laid with care, each timber secured like a promise. It wasn't grand, it wasn't polished, but it was ours. Leahy ran barefoot across the courtyard, chasing a stray squirrel, laughing in a way that made my chest ache with relief. Sarah sat on the steps of the main hall, her hands resting on the smooth edge of a log we had sanded for her. She looked out over the valley, breathing in the quiet. It wasn't silence, it was peace, and for once, peace didn't feel like a stranger. "Can we stay forever?" Leahy asked, glancing up at me as I stacked firewood. Her question was simple, yet carried the weight of all the fear she'd known in her short life. I looked at Sarah, and she looked back at me. For a long moment, neither of us said a word. Then I felt it, the truth that had been creeping into my chest for weeks. "I dreamed of you both long before I ever found you," I admitted. "I didn't know it then, but the mountain, it was waiting for someone worth saving. And I think I was waiting for you." Sarah's eyes glistened. A soft, tremulous smile formed on her lips. She said, "I prayed for you every night. I thought the mountains had swallowed all hope. But you," she placed her hand on mine, "you brought us back to life." I swallowed, feeling the dust of the past and the warmth of the present collide in my throat. "Then we stay," I said. "All of us, here, together." We walked down to the courtyard hand in hand. Leahy twirled, kicking up dust in the spring sunlight. The old fort walls no longer felt like ruins. They felt like a home, a fortress of our own choosing, built from sweat, scars, and stubborn hearts. As night fell, we sat outside, a small fire between us. The stars blanketed the sky, more numerous than I'd ever remembered seeing. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. Leahy nestled beside her. And for the first time, I let myself believe that the mountains, those harsh, unyielding giants, had finally given us something beautiful. Not just survival, not just safety, but family, choice, and a life that was ours to claim. We stayed there, watching the firelight dance across their faces, and I realized the mountain belonged to us now. Not just the land, not just the fort, but our story, our beginning. And for the first time, I slept without fear.